Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. On behalf of the University of Helsinki, I would like to welcome you to the first online Helsinki Think Talk for the US titled Inspired by Finland, Reimagining AI for All. My name is Alec Thurnham and I am a liaison manager at the University of Helsinki. This event is designed to be an introduction of the University of Helsinki to some key stakeholders in the US East Coast on artificial intelligence and society. It's also an opportunity to hear from some top experts in Finland in their field and to ask them your questions. With this in mind, I would like to first thank the speakers and the audience for joining us today. This topic is of vital interest and importance as the role of technology in our public and private lives continues to grow. Some of you may be wondering why Finnish University is hosting an event targeting a US audience. Firstly, the University of Helsinki is a top 1% university globally and one of the premier universities in the Nordics. We want to tackle some of the world's biggest challenges head on. However, we know we cannot do this alone. That's why, as a university, we are strategically focused on global engagement, and this event will be the first of many interactions with our friends and colleagues in the US on matters relating to AI, but also on our other global themes, including education, climate change, and the future of health. Both the US and Finland are leaders in artificial intelligence, but perhaps in different ways and for different reasons. We know there is so much more we can do and learn by sharing our expertise and collaborating together. We hope this event will start discussions and longer-term engagement between Finnish and US-based actors, and that we can identify the ways in which we can work together in order to reimagine AI for all. Without much further ado, I will pass you over to the fantastic Anu Partanen, who will moderate this event. I hope you all enjoy the webinar, and I encourage you to reach out to me or any of the other speakers after the event. Thank you, Anu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alec, and welcome everyone on my behalf. So yes, my name is Anu Partanen, and I'll be moderating the event today. My own background is in journalism. I worked as a journalist for a long time in Finland and in the United States. And today I'm more in business consulting and international affairs, but I'm really happy to take part in conversations like these. During my time in the United States, I wrote a book called The Nordic Theory of Everything. And in that book, I compared life in the United States and in the Nordic countries and how the societies are structured. So I think there is so much that we can give to one another when taking different approaches in different societies and different regions in the world, as in Nordic countries and the US. And so today, I'm really happy to be here to discuss the topic of reimagining AI for all, and what kind of a Finnish or Nordic approach we can have, and how we could collaborate with the US in bringing the benefits of AI to everyone. We have fantastic speakers today, and I'll soon introduce them. But first, a few words to the audience, a little bit of housekeeping, if you will. So we would love to have this event to be a discussion as much as possible. So please feel free to share your thoughts and comments in the chat where everybody, the audience, can see it, as long as you remember to send your chat comment to all panelists and attendees. If you send it only to panelists, only the speakers will see it. So please send it to everyone. If you'd like to submit questions to our speakers, please use the Q&A button that you can see in the Zoom toolbar, and then we will do our best to bring those to our panelists and answer them. And if you see a question that somebody has asked that you think is great, please use the thumb function to upvote it, so then we can take the most popular questions as well. During the event, we're going to stop for Q&A sessions with our speakers. And during those times, you will have time also the opportunity to speak up. We're not going to have audience use video today at all, but you can write in the chat that I would like to comment or ask a question, and then our moderating team then can unmute you and you can ask your question yourself. That would be wonderful. We really welcome also your comments and questions, actually as a spoken word instead of only as a written word, but both methods obviously work. During the event, we will have automated subtitles to improve accessibility. You can turn them on and off from Zoom preferences, depending on whether you want to use them or not. So today's event, we're going to have first 3 speakers who are each going to be speaking for 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll have a short Q&A session with everybody after their presentation. And then we're going to bring them all back for a panel discussion. So along the way, when you have your thoughts and questions, you can target them to specific speakers, or if you only think of them later, you can bring them to the panel discussion towards the end. So turning to today's topic, how can we empower citizens and ensure artificial intelligence is used to benefit the society as a whole? Obviously, AI is increasingly a part of our daily lives, whether every one of us understands it or not. And it can obviously bring us great benefits, but of course, it all depends on how we implement it. And that has huge consequences for our societies. And as of today, as we all know, AI is mostly understood and used by a very small group of people who are experts in the area. And the University of Helsinki and our speakers today really would like to change that, and have already done tremendous amount to change that, as you will hear later today in the talks. And so they are really working to ensure that AI is used to benefit everyone, and that we can educate everyone, hopefully in the end, to understand what AI is about and how to use it, and empower people to use it also in the grassroots movements and so on. And so in this work, they follow the long Finnish history of radical openness, open science, open data, open innovation. Later this year, we will be celebrating the 30th anniversary of the launching of Linux, the world's most popular open source operating system. And of course, this operating system was created by a Finn, Linus Torvalds, while he was a student at the University of Helsinki. And so in fact, one of our speakers today, Petri Myllymäki, has a very direct personal connection to Linus Torvalds and Linux, as Linus was a young, talented student working in Petri's research group at the time. And he had this little side project that then kept growing and growing, and the rest is history. But overall, Finnish engineers working at Nokia, or researchers and entrepreneurs, really have a history of creating and supporting all sorts of open source innovation and world-changing technology. And now, of course, it is crucial that we have a similar democratic transformation in the use and understanding of AI, so that we can support democracy with it and use it for good, if you will. With that introduction, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Teemu Roos. Teemu is a professor of computer science at the University of Helsinki. He leads the education-related work at the Finnish Center for Artificial Intelligence. And he's also the lead instructor behind the extremely popular, open to all, free online course called Elements of AI, and the follow-up course Building AI. And we will be hearing about these courses more today. Welcome, Teemu. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anu, and thank you also, Alec, for the introduction. My name is Teemu Roos. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Helsinki. I really look forward to this meeting. I will give a brief presentation, but above all, I'm looking forward to meeting you all who are joining us today, or hearing from you if you're watching the recording at a later time. I really like I think Anu put it well, that Linux, which is going to turn 30 years, the operating system is a good example of the things we can achieve by bold thinking and openness and indeed collaboration. I think it's currently the case that Linux is in fact the most popular, most commonly used operating system already on 2 planets in the solar system. The second one being Mars, where obviously collaboration has been key as well. So that's a great example of how collaboration can get us really far and high up places. So I'll have a few slides here to make a few points that I wanted to highlight as maybe some food for thought and inspiration for discussion later on. So first of all, I would like to discuss a few myths related to AI, or the overall impression that we tend to have when we think and when we hear the word AI. What is the first thing that comes to our mind? And at least like many people, including myself, unless I'm really deep at work at doing some sort of scientific work on AI, most of the time, I'd normally think of perhaps science fiction or other types of less scientific concepts. AI is familiar to us through these, let's say, imagination and all these kind of wild ideas. And there's a lot of interesting things in there. Some of them are even sort of not only myths, so there's something true in them, but it's hard to tell which ones of them should be busted if you think of the Mythbusters style and the TV show style distinctions. So we could think of maybe some super intelligent, often some robots. We could think of self-driving cars that are in the headlines and even in the streets sometimes. We could think of our own employment, our jobs being displaced, and the economics being disrupted by AI. And we can think of various risks that AI maybe brings about. And so the discussion is really going on very actively in various places, in social media, when we, in the traditional press and journalism, and in our work. But it's really hard to get beyond these myths. Because of course we haven't been taught about AI at school. It's such a new discipline. It's new technology, so that we haven't really had the chance to familiarize ourselves with even the fundamentals of AI, and that's why it's really difficult to get beyond the myths. But it's still I think it's sort of essential that we try our best to get beyond the myths. And there's a bunch of reasons that I'd like to highlight and discuss. Reasons why we need to get beyond myths when we discuss AI and when it is debated. One of them is the everyday cost. So the very common situation where we might be able to use AI for something convenient, something fun, something useful, but we're perhaps a bit afraid that there's risks, or we have this negative sentiment that we might have gotten through films where AI is usually associated with risks and threats, and that kind of fear that slows down the adoption of AI solutions. So that's a practical downside that these myths and the fear brings about. There's also the scientific cost, so to speak, where it's really hard to invest our resources as societies into AI if the kind of public impression of AI is something that is more of a threat than an opportunity or something fun or useful. So that of course sort of slowing down also the work of scientists trying to build better and safer and more useful AI technologies. And without that, of course, we will not be able to power our industries, our businesses through the new technologies. But I would say that these three, they're of course significant issues, and we should strive to get beyond the myths because of them. But I still think that there is one more that is way more important in my books than any of these, and this I would call the societal cost. And by that I mean the fact that if the general public, if most of us are ignorant about even the fundamentals, even the basic principles of what AI is, what it isn't, what it can do, what it can't do, what risks are related, and so on and so forth. If we're ignorant about such things, even on a high level, even on the sort of headline level, then it's impossible that we engage in the discourse that is going on about how AI should be governed, what regulation should be put in place to ensure that it's used for the good rather than the bad purpose in the society, or that the outcomes are overall beneficial to the society. And also, speaking of sort of equal treatment It's sort of not only that like the average benefit doesn't always tell everything. It's more like it has to be also beneficial in an equal manner in the society. So we can't have those democratic decision-making processes that involve public discourse if most of us are not able to understand even what is being debated. And therefore, I would sort of claim that the most important decisions in the sense of how AI is going to impact our societies are not technological. We have plenty of technology that can be used to develop useful and very, very powerful AI technologies already since a few decades ago. So you don't really have to invent everything again today to be able to apply it. You can apply all the existing AI technology. So that's not the real issue or the most pertinent issue. I would claim, and I'll be keen to hear whether you agree or not, that the most important decisions are political, meaning decisions about how we sort of what kind of AI systems we decide to implement and allow in terms of regulating it, and what type of AI development do we decide to invest funds and invest our resources in. So that's why I think we need to get beyond myths so that we could have as wide public discourse as possible, as inclusive discourse as possible, to build that, let's say, societal or political will to steer AI into the direction that we see fit as a society or as societies. And to do that, we'll really need to be very inclusive. We need to build that common language, that common understanding, common ground to stand on and to have those debates. And once we do that, it's not only that we would be able to have like political discussions about regulation of AI. This is not the only benefit that you'll get from that. In addition, we'll be able to get more and better ideas. And it's in terms of the AI technology, as I already said, we already have plenty of technological tools that we could use to do extremely fun, interesting, and useful, productive things. But we just need to invent those things. And in a way, it is what is usually said is things are easier said than done. But in this case, I would almost say that it's the other way around. It's easier done than said, meaning that once you get the idea that in this domain, be that teaching or education, be that sports, art, music, or your business, you're the one who is the expert, who knows the need, knows the demand for new solutions, not the engineer, not the technologist. So the need and the opportunity needs to be identified by the people that are invested in that discipline or in that sphere of life. So I, as a computer scientist, I have no way to come up with the best ideas where AI could be applied, even though I might have the technical solutions to do that. So that's what I mean by having better ideas when everybody's engaged and involved. What we've done to try to build this common ground and common language and common understanding is the Elements of AI course, which Megan will tell you all about. So I will not go into the details, but just to point out that these kind of initiatives might help in building that common language and the common culture and understanding. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to the next speakers, just wrapping up and recapping that if we're reimagining AI for all, as the title of this event is, we should all just approach it in with the intent of learning what it is, what it isn't, what it can do, what it can't do, and just have fun with it. And once you kind of learn that it's not something mystical, it's not a wire a bunch of wired in a bubbling solution. It's not something that you need to have a PhD or a couple PhDs, I suppose. Some people think to even approach the thing. Once you understand that it's all very understandable, relatively straightforward principles that are the underlying things, you can get involved, you can form an informed opinion, and then start getting those better ideas all together. So that's really what I look forward to, and then also look forward to hearing the other presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teemu. We have a few minutes for Q&A with Teemu, and we already have one question or a comment from Merv Hickok. And my apologies to everyone at this moment if I'm gonna butcher your names when I read them from the chat. Merv is saying, is it all ignorance, or is it being intimidated by how these technologies are framed, or how the focus is so much on AI experts?
Yeah, I guess in a way they're kind of related things. Like once you learn a bit about AI in a way that is not portrayed as like some sort of, I don't know, alchemy or some sort of magic, then you start being less intimidated by it. So I think it's sort of, if you get to the bottom of things, if somebody's sort of explaining it in easily approachable terms, and then you start being less ignorant, and you also start being less intimidated by it. But I agree that it's really not easy to get to that, to find information about AI that is not that is not created or offered to try to impress people. So I think we kind of, unfortunately, we try to impress each other a bit too much, and try to sort of understand things and simplify things a bit too little. And in that sense, I would hope that becoming less ignorant also means becoming less intimidated by it. At least that's my hope.
So you also mentioned that you think that these are really political questions in how AI is regulated and how decision makers are approaching AI. What should we be doing in getting the decision makers to understand AI? I mean, obviously they're extremely busy. We're all going to hope that they all take elements of AI. But so what do you think in practical terms, how can we ensure that the regulations coming out are designed in a way that actually allows us to use AI for the benefits of all?
I'm afraid I don't have an easy solution. I don't have a kind of a shortcut. I'm afraid since like decision makers, you know, they're just like every one of us. They're human beings, and we're all busy. They're all busy, yeah, I haven't come up with a shortcut. So I sometimes get asked if like really busy people, like I don't know, some people perhaps think they're like more busy than the average person. They ask you, okay, is there like a 5-minute version of your 30-hour course? And I have to disappoint them and say that, you know, if you think this is an important topic, I think Risto Siilasmaa, the chairman of the board of Nokia, put it well. So if you think this is a disruptive technology, this is going to really be important in your business, and you're not spending a significant amount of time to learn about it, then you're sort of like, there's no logic in that. If you think it's really important, then you should sort of put a lot of time in studying it and prioritize. I mean, we're all busy, but it's about prioritizing the time. So yeah, I'm afraid I can't sort of give a 5-minute shortcut. They just have to prioritize their time and just try to understand it. But it's not so that you'd have to sort of start from linear algebra or whatever, like the core underlying technology or something, but you know, you can learn it on a, as I said, like on a headline level, but you got to start somewhere, and then sort of study as much as you need to to be able to make the decisions that you're about to make. And of course, listen to the experts. But it's better if you can sort of have the basic principles in order to be critical, because there's also like experts and there's experts. So, you know, some experts perhaps they have an agenda, and so in order to be able to take that with a grain of salt, sometimes you need to have at least the basics in your own head, not somebody else's.
We have another common question from the audience. Chang Feng Wan is saying, I think the first challenge to use AI is that people don't know, for the people who don't know anything about computer programming, is the writing of code. Do you think there will be some easier way to use it?
Definitely not. You don't need to be able to code to understand AI. Like if you're going to start developing solutions, then of course you or somebody else in your team needs to be able to code them up and implement them. And it's sometimes easy to understand things if you've done a bit of coding and you do some sort of little experiments. But I don't think it's really necessary at all. I think we'll return to this when we'll discuss the elements of AI and how that actually doesn't have any coding at all, the first part. And it still is able to, well, at least we hope so, to convey the basic principles of how AI works, how it turns data into informed decisions and automated predictions and so on, without any coding or indeed almost any mathematics at all. So I think that's something definitely, that's a good question. Like I think it's important to point out that you don't need to be a programmer or a software developer or computer scientist at all. I think many people think that they don't have the background knowledge to be able to get started, but that's probably not true. I think like every single one of us, every single person is able to get started and understand pretty much about AI, even without going back to school and studying and hitting the maths books or programming courses.
We have one more question that we could take now, and then the other questions, if you have more questions for Teemu, you can type them in the Q&A box, and when we bring Teemu back for the panel discussion, we can bring those in. But let's take Leevi Saari's comment. What are the biggest other impediments in your view why the policymakers would not succeed in regulating AI for the benefit of all? What else is it than ignorance? On the one hand, it is also that all novel, abstract things are very difficult to regulate in a way that fits to existing governance frameworks.
Well, I mean, I suppose we gotta be like, we don't want to be sort of idealistic or blue-eyed. Obviously, there's some sort of power imbalance. There's huge corporations. There's strong lobbying activities going on in different places like the EU that is right now developing its AI regulation. That obviously has also enters the picture. So it's not, I don't envy the decision makers who are trying to get an unbiased view on the matter, but still there's like lots of political to and fro of you know, different opinions, different stakeholders having their own interest to protect. So yeah, it's like any politics, it gets political, right? So that's definitely something that we shouldn't pretend that isn't there, but we should just admit that there is power imbalances, and we're gonna just try to be transparent, try to make sure that in any decision making, also the people who don't have like any particular mechanism to gain power more than anybody else, their voices are also heard. So that and that's a really difficult age-old question of politics.
Thank you, Teemu. We'll bring you back for the panel discussion, and like I said, keep questions or comments coming, and Teemu will be back. And now our next speaker is Megan Scheibel. Megan is the Chief Operating Officer, Reactor Education. Reactor is a strategy, design, and engineering company based in New York, Helsinki, Amsterdam, Stockholm, and Tokyo. And so Reactor and University of Helsinki collaborated together to create these elements of AI course that we keep talking about. And Megan is here to tell us more about it. So welcome, Megan. The floor is yours.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me today. I was just telling Anu earlier that you can tell that I'm from the States, and when I moved to Finland for the first time, I didn't really know anything about this place, and I was staying at an Airbnb for 2 weeks, and her book was there, so I highly recommend it for understanding just the sort of cultural differences here. And I think leading on from Teemu's discussion about the openness of the Finnish culture, I can certainly say that that's been reflected here in my own experience and in my privilege to be a part of this really amazing project, which we call the Elements of AI. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. I have a lot of slides to go through, which I'm going to do very quickly, just to sort of illustrate the story of how this happened and really what we're doing with this initiative. Okay. So again, like I said, like was mentioned, Reactor is actually a technology consultancy. So we're headquartered here in Helsinki, and you can see this is a view from our rooftop towards the cathedral. But we do have offices in other cities around the world, including in New York. So if you're in the States right now, that's our presence there. We typically develop, all different types of digitization and solutions for technology for our clients. One of our flagship clients in the New York office is HBO. So we actually helped develop the HBO Go app and the actual web page as well, which both broke all sorts of streaming records with shows like Game of Thrones, and we've won several awards with that kind of collaboration. But we also do a lot of sort of outside the box projects, one of which is Elements of AI. So here we have a smart ferry project, and we actually were the first organization here in Finland to have our own space program and launch our own satellite. All of these technologies, whether you're looking at a consumer-based, tool like the HBO Go app, or the sort of computer vision algorithms that are helping, map climate change in the satellite, they incorporate AI. So that's really part of our expertise here. But what does this have to do with education? So if you remember from that first photo, we actually moved headquarters into this beautiful new building in downtown, across the street from the University of Helsinki, who is actually our landlord. So we wanted to mark this occasion with something to give back to society. So that word society is something that Teemu brought up again and again in his presentation, and that ended up being the sort of major crux around everything that we tried to achieve here with this project. So for us, we and the university know us from working with our clients and developing consumer-based solutions, and the university and Teemu and his team from their research, we know that there's a lot of anxiety in society around the future of work, around AI, automation, and disruption. So we really wanted to tackle these issues head on. So rather than create something that was in the elite segments of AI, we wanted to make sure that we created a course together that really was for everyone, but specifically for people who are left outside of technology. Because if technology is going to impact all of us, it shouldn't be left in the hands of a few elite coders. So now we have the core motivation of the concept of the project, Elements of AI, and we have our target audience, people who are left outside of technology. So in creating the course, this is actually what was the premise for us to get started. And we created a course that we wanted to make sure that was aimed at the people that we were trying to build it for. We understand that they have hectic modern lifestyles. So again, these are not for computer science students. These are for people that are, maybe working full time or have families. So we have to understand that these people are going to be taking these courses in their free time. We also know that 85% of Europeans access the internet primarily on their mobile phones. So we need to be able to create something for people that is mobile first and easily accessible. And this goes from everything to the graphic design, conversational copywriting, and the actual instructional design as well. And we kind of came in with this concept as experts in consumer technology design that says most of the things that we use in our daily lives, whether it's your phone or an app that you're using, is done with design thinking, which is putting the end user in the middle and thinking as a concept around what they actually need. So for here, it's thinking about this concept in terms of online education. And we made this happen by creating focus groups and working in an agile development way with the University of Helsinki's computer science team. And of course, one-to-one with Professor Teemu Roos, who wrote the course. So what we mean by agile development is that the course was built in iterative increments, so that this was something that we were testing with people, adapting and tweaking and continuing that adaptation. So even now, when we're working with our partners across Europe, we need to see what works in Croatia, what works in France. And this is a part of the system that we're building to this day. And then, of course, the third thing is very important, the multiplier effect. So we know that you can build the best thing in the world and put it out there, but if it doesn't actually get seen by people, if it doesn't get in the hands of the people who need it most, it's really not a very purposeful or impactful project. So for us, what we've done throughout this project is to try to boost that multiplier effect with strategic partnerships in public and private sector, again, alongside the University of Helsinki. We created this course on the introduction of AI, which Teemu has already mentioned, targeting people that are typically left out of technology. The course itself is in 6 chapters. So the first chapter talks about what AI is and isn't. The next 4 chapters talks about key areas of applied AI in increasing complexity. So at the beginning, we might talk about things like search algorithms, using real life examples from things that people would know, like the map applications on their phone, all the way to chapter 5, which talks about, deep learning and more complex things like computer vision or GANs, which are generative adversarial networks. Then that is a really big term, but we can, like Teemu said in his presentation, make these things understandable to the general public. And GANs are what actually make the technology behind deepfakes possible, which brings us into the implications chapter. So now that people know about all these different types of AI, where it's applied and how it impacts them in their daily life and work, what does that mean for their future, for their careers, and for how they're actually going to interact with the world as voters, as consumers, as people who engage with online media? And this is what we mean by creating a general foundation and a dialogue around these subjects. So again, just putting the course online, we tried to create a really big impact. That was the point we wanted to make. Our goal was to educate 1% of the Finnish population. So at the beginning, we told the first cohort of graduates that they could attend a ceremony in Helsinki. We had over 800 people attend. It was hosted by the president of Finland. We had keynote speakers like Risto Siilasmaa, chairman of Nokia, and this was picked up by the media. We had people travel from all over the place, seniors, students, men, women, and this was really the start of what would become a societal phenomenon around educating on these AI topics. We also started the AI Challenge, which was a sort of Twitter campaign, which we've rolled out again and again and again to get companies to pledge to educate 10% of their workforce on the basics of AI. And we now have over 1,000 companies that have joined this. We've had our own students approach us for sort of organic projects that have got us into the media. So one of our students, one of Teemu's students actually, is the head of something called a Smart Prison Project. And she said, prisoners are coming into a job force that is dramatically changed from the beginning of their incarceration, and they need to be reintegrated back into society in a way to be able to cope with the reality of the world as it stands now. So how do we get this course in there? And this story was picked up by Wired magazine in the UK, and then subsequently Business Insider in the United States made a Facebook documentary about this story. So do check that out as well. We also, as Teemu mentioned, have been global grand prize winners in the MIT Innovation Challenge, which is about helping marginalized people really participate in the modern economy with these kinds of educational tools. The CEO of Finland told the CEO of Google told the Prime Minister of Finland that he really appreciates this project of educating 1%, and he wishes that other countries could use it as a template. Emmanuel Macron, in one of his national AI speeches in 2019, said that Finland has shown the path, and he wishes that the EU Commission could do this for the rest of the area. And even the OECD in their Observer magazine has cited elements of AI as one of the reasons that Finland will succeed in the 21st century. Again, as Teemu said, because it's one of those things that is done as a grassroots movement to help society run better. So this is really at the crux of what we did here in Finland, and we decided to keep the momentum and roll it out across the EU, creating hybrid partnerships to increase the impact on the ground. This is the kind of stories that came out around it in Finland. You can see here from Wired and Politico. This was Finland's success, Finland's experiment, building on the technology education and the excellent education system here in general as part of our story. So this is really what we put together to sell to other countries to be a part of this too. We have different kinds of programs that we run with our partners. And if you're interested, please do ask me. And this is just one example of one of our first partners here in Sweden. We actually had a Finnish government minister challenge his counterpart in Sweden to educate their society to be 1% taking this course, Elements of AI. And that challenge was accepted on Twitter. And then the story got picked up by Computer Weekly. So this is the kind of momentum that we like to build and the stories that we like to bring around this with our partners. This is another partner here in Germany, the German Chamber of Commerce. They have over 4 million member organizations, and they also accredit this as part of their vocational training for the national curriculum in IT. And we've also worked with the Finnish government now on a major project. So Finland held the presidency of the European Council at the latter half of 2019. And we actually work with the government now to get elements of AI given as a gift to invest in the education of all of Europe. So the European Commission translated elements of AI into every official EU language. And we have now formed partnerships on the ground with every single EU nation, with universities, NGOs, and government actors. Again, this is our hybrid team that we've built with Reactor and the University of Helsinki to form this huge ecosystem of partnerships to get this course out in front of real people, because we here don't know what's going to work in Zagreb or what's going to work, in a province in France. Our partners on the ground do, and that's what helps get this course momentum. Right now, Elements of AI is ranked the #1 computer science course in the world. And we've also been ranked one of the top 100 online courses in history as well. And that's by our students who have voted. And speaking of students, we now have over 715,000 students from over 140 countries. But most importantly for us, over 40% of those students are women, which is over double the average of every other computer science course online. So again, when you use design thinking to build something specifically around the needs of a certain target audience and a target user, good things really happen, and you can build traction in these areas that may have been left behind by other types of education, focusing on, just a typical computer science curriculum or student. And I do believe as well that the University of Helsinki saw a significant increase in their number of women applicants to their computer science program as well. So just to wrap this up, building on this mission of ours now to educate nations, we've done a number of things since then. One is to continue to roll out to new regions. So we're very excited to have this sort of debut in the United States right now to be able to bring this further. But as Teemu mentioned, we've also launched a sequel course called Building AI. Super cool. Just really quickly, it's in 3 different levels. So from beginner, you don't need to know how to code. Intermediate, you're editing Python machine learning models. And then on the advanced level, for people that actually know Python, you can start already building and training these machine learning models. The great thing about this is that the coding environment is in the course, which means that if you had no experience of this before, you can just go in, log into the course, and start building these kinds of models and experimenting with these things without downloading any other programs or navigating anywhere else. You can train machine learning models for the very first time without having to do or use any other tools at all. So we're really lowering the barrier to entry here on these subjects. And again, for the comments from people in the audience earlier today, we use case examples in this course from real life business. So things like, recycling centers using computer vision, there's medical examples, there's all different kinds of things that people use in real life. And this is really something that Teemu speaks about quite a bit. So if you had somebody walk up to you on the street and ask you, what is AI? How does it work? He has said before several times that, he would just ask somebody to pull out their phone and start going through the apps and start going through the things that they're exposed to in real life. And that's really what this course does. And at the end, students can actually build their own AI project and launch it on GitHub for the whole world to see. And this allows students from all over the world to really collaborate together and see, how we can sort of share these visions and share these kind of efforts beyond the course environment itself. And for us at Reactor Education, one of the things that we just launched last couple of weeks actually was a project with the European Union. So for that, we built a new online learning portal for EU citizens focusing on emerging technologies. And a part of that was actually to build in a course catalog featuring over 100 courses on these areas at all different levels. And we incorporated all the courses from the University of Helsinki that are publicly available into this as well. So this is meant to discuss the idea of creating an ecosystem approach with your partners that goes beyond anything that one private business or one public sector university or even a government could do. This requires multiple efforts from multiple actors that come together to make these kinds of things a reality. And again, this partnership is still ongoing, and we're exploring all new kinds of opportunities. So we're really happy to be here today. And I'll just end with this one question for everyone here. How can you think about getting your online education into the hands of people who need it most? And that's really what we're about trying to achieve with what we do, and really sort of created this model together with the university. So thank you again for having us.
Thank you, Megan. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions here, and then Megan will also be back for the panel discussion. So please, if you have any questions or thoughts, just type them in. And if we don't get to them right now, we will get to them later. Obviously, as you have shown us, the class is available in different languages, in different countries. The EU has really sort of gathered around it. What about the United States? Has it been successful in the US?
We do have quite a few users that are signing in from the US, but we don't have any sort of active partnerships there yet. The EU project was one that took our team several months to execute, because the deal went through with the Finnish government and with the European Commission, and we actually had this team here in Helsinki working with every single country, forming all these partnerships on the ground. So now that all the launches have been completed, we're really re-exploring again all of these kind of partnerships in the rest of the world. And actually, one of the ones that we're doing right now is in collaboration with the UN and the UN Development Bank in Africa. So that's a project that we're working on with the University of Helsinki and the UN to roll out elements of AI in a few different African nations as well.
So what kind of a partner do you think you'd like to have in the United States? What kind of a partner is the best from your perspective to make things happen?
It depends on what makes sense in the context. And that's what I meant by these hybrid partnerships. So in each context, we have operating overhead and we need funding partners to help make this a reality. In the German context, for instance, this was the DIHK, which is the German Chamber of Commerce. In Estonia, it was actually the university itself who brought in, who brought the funding and was the actual academic partner as well. We always try to have an academic partner so that the course is accredited locally. We believe that this is a really big motivator for local students to find relevance in the course and being able to put it into their own kind of context. And also that it helps with the translations, and the universities get to join this academic network now that we've built with dozens of top universities and technology offices around Europe. So this is these hybrid partnerships are really how we feel that we get this course in front of the people who need it most. So this includes public library initiatives, people who work with SMEs, and those kind of organizations that get these courses out in front of those kind of groups, because large corporations can afford to spend a lot of money on education and training and things like that, but SMEs might not have those resources, and they might not even know where to get started on these things. So we work quite a bit in that area as well.
Thank you, Megan. I saw there were a few questions that we were thinking we'll take during the panel discussion, so we could now have our final speaker of today, Petri, and then Megan will be back for the panel discussion. Thank you, Megan. So our final speaker will be Petri Myllymäki. Petri is a professor of artificial intelligence and machine learning at the University of Helsinki. Petri is also director of what you see in front of you already, Finnish Center for Artificial Intelligence. So Petri, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anu. Very nice to be here. So I'm here to paint a little bit bigger picture. So you all heard this of this very nice example of elements of AI. So I'm going to tell you about Finnish Center for AI. Teemu is leading our education program, but there are other things happening as well. But first, a couple of words about Finland in general. I guess we Finns are kind of shy in blowing our own trumpet, so we rather refer to what other people are saying about us. We are the happiest country in the world for the 4th year running this year, which is kind of a little bit puzzling for Finns, but we take it if you say so. We have been selected as the 7th most innovative country in the world. So this sounds already a little bit better. 7th is like better than the 1st. The 1st is kind of, it's weird. But we are the most effective. We have the most effective universities in the world. And we are, of course, a small nation. That means that we are a small market, that we are not interesting as a market, but small size can be an advantage as well. So we are a small country, but we have a very well educated population, as you already heard, and kind of Megan was talking about this kind of society-wide experiments, of which elements of AI is one. So in this country with very good data resources, well-functioning government, people's trust the government, this can be used as a living lab or test bed of where the future digital societies are going based on trustworthy and human-centric AI. So this is how we would like to kind of introduce Finland to the outside parties. So AI in Finland, this is also that you may not be aware of, but we have been a pioneer in AI research in already over 50 years. And Teemu, I guess, brought this up in the chat, but we were recently selected by Coursera as the top data science nation in the world. We have very, very good AI and data science masters programs. Helsinki is number 4 emerging startup ecosystem globally, and within EU, Finland has been nominated as the most competitive country in digital transformation. So Finnish Center for Artificial Intelligence. So Finland was also one of the first countries to have a national AI program, and as a result of this, Finland, through the Academy of Finland, decided to launch a national AI flagship. It's been like ramped up or kickstarted by an 8-year-long program with a budget of 250 million euros. And the idea is to kind of pool all our best resources together to not only support high quality research, but more importantly, to support impact based on this high quality research. So what we do in Finnish Center for AI, we try to create new types of AI that can operate with humans in the complex world and can, looking inside Finland, we try to renew the industry and society. So our slogan is real AI for real people in the real world. So what do we mean by this? So by real AI, we mean a couple of things. So the first meaning is that we mean realistic AI. So Teemu was talking about myths in AI. So in order to create impact, we need to create something that can be actually utilized, and now or within the few next years. Otherwise, I mean, like issues like whether super intelligence can ever emerge is interesting academically, but it's not very useful within the next years or even decades. So it's realistic, but on the other hand, current AI systems are kind of naive and not very intelligent. So we would like to bring AI further and make it more towards what people normally think artificial intelligence should be. So in that case, we want it to be more real intelligence. But the most important thing is that we are building for people. So for real people, this means that we want to build AI systems that can be used as companions or assistants, can be used for augmenting humans instead of replacing them. And this means that AIs need to be able to interact with humans in ways that are understandable, trustworthy, and ethically solid. And finally, real-world AI. Real-world AI, I believe, was one chapter in the Elements of AI course. So this means that, I mean, we want to bring the state-of-the-art and beyond AI techniques from the laboratories to the real world, and this is where the real people actually work. So we need to be able to work with the constraints imposed by the real world in environments. So this was our slogan. The Academy of Finland, when they chose us as a kind of as a science flagship or national AI flagship, they emphasized that we need to think about impact more generally than just scientific impact. So scientific impact, that's our business as usual. So that's not too difficult. But even within science, we are looking things more broadly than just impact in AI research. We are collaborating a lot with other sciences, other disciplines through our AI across fields, AI and X program. So that's one angle. Then educational impact. You already heard a lot why educational impacts of educating both the workforce of a nation and also the general public, why these are highly important. Economic impact, renewal of existing businesses, creating new ones, that's another important area. And finally, we want to support the transformation of the society towards more digital society so that human is put in the center. And the AI that is used in this transformation is going to be effective and ethical. So these are the different areas of impact that we are considering. And finally, we are proud members of a larger community in Europe. So the European Commission, in their recently published coordinated plan on AI, has a plan to create a polycentric AI lighthouse of Europe. And this ELLIS network of excellence is one of the central pillars in this AI lighthouse. And we, as FCAI, we are hosting ELLIS Unit Helsinki, that is one of the 30 nodes that facilitate collaboration in 14 European countries, not only limited to EU, but also UK, Switzerland, and Israel are in this context counted as Europe. So this is our European point of view. And I think in order to save some time, I will stop here, and I'm looking forward to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Petri. Yes, we can move on to the panel in a moment. Petri, I wanted to ask you just one question. So What solutions and examples of human-centric AI are already in place in Finland?
Aha, that's a good question. I should have foreseen that. Maybe just a good example doesn't come into my mind immediately, but what I mean is that people usually have a wrong kind of idea of, I mean, like Teemu was talking about, like the myth that people are losing their jobs. So, and then people are talking about, okay, autonomous cars will make taxi drivers without their work. But if you think this further, if you have a lot of luggage, or you are an elderly person or a handicapped person, it doesn't help you if there's a robot car coming in front of your house. I mean, people don't seem to realize that. I mean, we are a long way before we can, I mean, fully automate things. So AIs can be helpful, but at some point they are humans are facing the AIs, and this is what we mean by human-centric. So you take the needs of the human first.
Okay, and so Teemu mentioned the need for AI experts to speak to experts from other disciplines. How do you deal with this through FCAI?
Oh yeah, this we have been thinking a lot, and it's not very easy, but we have a kind of a multifaceted approach. So we need to create first contacts, and for that we use something called AIX Forum. So, I mean, obviously we have a lot of events where we preach about AI. So we have a weekly seminar for machine learning researchers to distribute their wisdom. But this is not a good, I think, not a good way to start collaboration, probably, or not the only way. So in an AIX forum, the idea is that the forum is given to the X-men or X-people in general, so that from some area of X being not AI, it can be any area, it can be a science or a sector in a society like traffic or public government or whatever. Those people present their problems and where they imagine that they could use AI, and the AI experts are in the audience. And then we try to facilitate the kind of finding the doing the matchmaking and finding the most high impact links.
Thank you, Petri. I'd like to invite our other speakers back with your cameras on and to join the conversation. So Megan, Teemu, and Petri, we can have you. And so everybody in the audience, please feel free to, again, type your questions in the Q&A, or if you'd like to actually speak up and voice your thoughts or comments, you can also do that by typing in the chat that you would like to speak up, and then our moderators can give you a chance, can unmute you, literally. Let's talk a little bit about elements of AI now that we have you all here. My first question to Megan, there are so many online courses out there. What do you think makes this one different from others?
Well, a few things. So a lot of the other courses online are sort of video MOOCs. So you have a sort of professor speaking in a monotone voice, going through PowerPoint slides, or even standing at a whiteboard, that sort of thing. They're really copy pastes of lecture theater environments, which works if you just want to put your curriculum online and have it be, for the same target audience as it was intended for. A lot of courses in any specific domain are designed for students who are going to major in that subject area. But when you want to take a subject that is complex and intimidating like AI and make it approachable to the general public, it really needs to be a fundamentally different approach. So that's where the graphics come in. They're really fun and inviting. The copywriting as well is very conversational. So I mean, I'm sure that Teemu can talk about the iterative experience of writing and editing this as well. It's a different audience, and that's the most important thing here, that you design something that is actually aimed at the needs of the end user. And then from the actual implementation approach, again, having something that people can take on their bus ride to work, that each chapter is in sections, and each section would take somebody between 20 and 40 minutes to complete. So people can feel like they have this sense of accomplishment without feeling like they need to just derail their whole life to go back to education. So if you have, full-time jobs or families or things like that, this is also a really, really important factor that people can feel like they can actually wrap their heads around, and their time around this as they'll be taking this course in their free time.
So we have a question related to this from Zubair Ahmed Sadid. And he's saying, this question is not just limited to AI, but as technology keeps getting more complex, but also more integrated with life in general, do you think the market for ed tech enterprises like Reactor Education is going to expand to bring understandable technology to more people? Now, I'm assuming that perhaps Megan's answer is yes. Would you, Megan, want to comment a little? And then I wanted to ask Teemu about what it felt like as an academic to work with a company on this course. But yeah, Megan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. And there's all kinds of, I would absolutely yes, online education is exploding right now. So Class Central, which is the kind of website that Teemu and I have been citing that listed Elements of AI as the #1 computer science course. They actually have a blog where they post a lot of research in general on MOOCs and these kinds of areas. And they said that for everyone who's ever signed up for an education platform, 1/3 did so in 2020. So the pandemic and people losing their jobs and things like this, it was time for people to go back to school. They were at home and they had the time. And this was something that made people, kind of speed up their thought process around getting to grips with the future of work and these types of technologies. So the answer is yes, in general. But then that also means that there's room for all different kinds of players in the market and all different types of approaches. The important thing to think about with Elements of AI and even building AI is it's not a replacement for university education. It's a yes and this is what's really critical now when you think about continuing education. And when you think about blended curriculums, so cross-disciplinary, Elements of AI fits in super well into business curriculum, or into people who are studying, in industrial engineering would need to know about these technologies. They're not necessarily going to be practicing them, but it's just really nice to be able to wrap your head around these kinds of things. And that's really where we see fitting in here. And that's the kind of courses that we're doing at Reactor Education now. They take a lot of time. They're very premium. There's a lot of work that goes into them. There's a whole team of people with us and with the University of Helsinki that are working on these things. So our approach is not, the kind of volume Coursera disruptor out there. We're just trying to create something that has a deep impact on the people that we can affect.
So Teemu, my question to you, perhaps to continue on what Megan just said, but so what was it like from your perspective to work with a company like this? I remember you were once telling me about how it opened up totally new avenues for making it understandable and relatable to people.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just to sort of continue the sentence that Megan started, pretty much. I also agree that online education and just like continuing education, lifelong learning, things are finally maturing to the level where they'll really be disruptive. We've been expecting this to happen, and people have been expecting this to happen for 10 years now. I think like 10 years ago when the big MOOC platforms started rising, people were expecting a much faster disruption. But I guess this is what happens usually when there's some like really novel things, that the short-term impact is overestimated, but the long-term impact is underestimated. And I think we're now starting to see the long-term impact in terms of upskilling, reskilling, becoming really like everybody's business. And like we don't any longer think that when we're graduating from school, our future is like then determined at that point, and we would be working in the same profession ever after. So I think that's been understood, and we're also developing various ways of, for instance, collecting and demonstrating your credentials that are not like these monolithic degrees anymore, but they're like these piecemeal things that you keep on adding to your skills. So to answer the actual question, how has it been to collaborate in this constellation where we've had the public university and a private company, to me, it really has been totally sort of mind-blowingly interesting and opened up entirely new ways of thinking about education and learning, in the sense that I think that like the pedagogical core things of challenging the student to construct their own ideas, instead of sort of that like super old-fashioned ideal of just, you know, transferring a block of knowledge from one head from the professor's head to the student's head. Like we've abandoned this type of idea for a long while ago. At least I hope, even in the university. But I think still there's still like a further let's say stage of evolution where we're now starting to think of designing the learning. So it's kind of learning design, which you can sort of think of as being similar to service design or even web design. And these kind of design ideas being so strongly at the core of everything we've been doing with the course, brought by Reaktoros experts on that. That has really made the big difference. I think, well, like for instance, the thing that Megan mentioned, the kind of small units of learning, and then sort of enabling the users to go at their own pace. This is something, of course, that we don't have to think about too much when we're thinking about the university students, who are, we can basically have them in the auditorium and lock the door and say that, okay, for 2 hours we have their uninterrupted attention. And of course, with the like non-university students, we can't do that. They're in their bus and they're wondering, well, what is on Netflix? Maybe I should follow up my series or whatever. And we're competing against Netflix and YouTube and whatnot. And I think that was the thing that we put. I mean, that we explicitly discussed that in the very beginning, that this is the competition we're facing, competition for attention, and that was, it's a whole different thing compared to having kind of external circumstances with the lecture rooms and the requirements for the students getting their degrees, ensuring that we gain their attention, even if we kind of don't strive too much to do that. Of course, this has sort of helped us also improve our teaching at the university. So I think it sort of goes beyond the elements of AI. You know, we can take these learnings and further improve our teaching. And yeah, I don't sort of still, I don't just like, I guess to add to that, I don't want to give the impression that at the university, you know, or any university, the professors would be sort of taking the students' attention for granted. I think like it's also a mistake to put up sort of stray man arguments and saying that university teaching is really like just, you know, boring professors like me and Petri, but it's rather a sort of also going forward, and the students are all the time more demanding and also sort of giving us really constructive feedback about how to improve our teaching. So it's not like, again, fair to sort of paint things like completely black and white, but still it has been a really kind of interesting learning curve to adopt those kind of, let's say, design ideas into education. And I think there's a lot to be lots more to do. I mean, we can still come up with more and even better ideas than we've employed in the elements of AI.
Petri has raised a hand. Go ahead, Petri.
Thanks. So I would just like to bring up one thing that people may have missed, that as a kind of a society-wide experiment, if we are not talking about education itself, this elements of AI is also interesting as a statistics. If you're wondering like who is interested in AI, and if you give them an easy to approach, easy to access tool, then the reply, surprisingly, at least to me, is that it's not only young male nerds who are interested in AI, it's people from all different groups of I mean, age groups and kind of a different gender, pretty balanced. That's even more surprising, even thinking even globally. So I think this is one very important message that we learned from this tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really appreciate Petri bringing that up. I just read in the paper today, I think there is a company in the Nordics, an IT company that had done an experiment in terms of their recruiting, where they had replaced some terms that I didn't even understand that they would be gendered terms, but they had sort of intentionally sort of scanned their job ads, and they had removed terms like motivated or I don't know, like natural leader or whatever, code warrior, I guess is the sort of commonly used thing. I don't know if they had anything like that, but anyways, and they tried to sort of make it more neutral. That would sort of maybe speak towards a more wider and diverse pool of talent. And they had actually seen a huge, like statistically speaking, huge manifold increase in the number of female applicants to these jobs. They had actually run both ads. They had run both versions of the ads, so they could actually collect the statistics to compare that. And I think that rang a bell, because I remember us discussing when we were designing the elements of AI, different ways, and being quite thorough and quite sort of systematic in removing any like stereotypical things that would. So we didn't like design the course, let's say, for women or elderly people or anything like that. But on the other hand, we wanted to remove any of the like stereotypical illustrations, for instance. The way the illustrations are designed, it tries to avoid the really the boring old, like a male robot, for instance. Okay, there's a robot, but it's kind of neutral gender, I suppose. We tried to avoid making everything blue. We tried to avoid like space or some, you know, looking at the Earth from space, or some sort of really like engineering type illustrations, with the intent of being sort of speaking to more diverse crowd. And I think that it matches the experience of the IT company that was recruiting talent just now. And I think that there is really something very powerful there in trying to ensure that it's neutral in that sense, not addressing, let's say, you don't have to make it like, I don't know, it would be equally foolish to make it pink and you know, use flowers or whatever that you think that is stereotypically like a female thing, and that would be equally silly. But I think like more or less sort of getting rid of the very prominent stereotypical things is the key.
I would just jump in quickly to say that I also really appreciate in the pedagogical side of the course that it's not, this is not a course where it's like reading a blog, like where is AI applied? The exercises, you actually walk through, you know, basic mathematical and logic problems to understand the logic behind the algorithms and how these kind of things work together and build. So there's exercises on search algorithms, there's exercises on logic trees, and this kind of shows the idea that there's, you know, there's variables, and if you want to have a certain outcome, where, you know, if you move this, what happens to this? And all of these things are really, you know, they're math. But when you take the course and when you go through it, you know, these are, again, math and STEM and all of these kind of subjects are things that are, you know, seen as very intimidating or seen as a foreign language to a lot of people. When you use the word algorithm, it's terrifying, but algorithms have been around for 500 years. So really, this is something that can be explored in the course, where you're not just reading about it, you're actually starting to explore the process of thinking like a data scientist.
So I wanted to switch to a little bit different topic. Today here in the talks, you talked about the Finnish approach to open source and data and to educating people for AI. I would like to ask a question to all of you. Do you think or see differences in how different either countries or regions approach either regulating AI or thinking about it, sort of philosophically, what it should be used for? And if so, if you think that there are sort of differences in thinking, what do you think is different perhaps about the Nordic thinking or Finnish thinking as from others? And maybe we'll start with Petri.
Yeah, so okay, maybe this relates to your earlier question about like what do we mean by human-centric. So I guess, I mean, it could mean that humans as citizens or humans as individuals or humans as consumers, but it's still like humans first, organizations next. And maybe now that I had a few minutes to think about an example, there's a national project called Aurora AI that tries to create public services based on AI that is kind of, they take the services to the next level, and they take humans or citizens in this case as the kind of the center. So I mean, normally you build public services like organizations are like taxation, health, education, and so forth. So it's like different areas and they take care of different duties. But in this case, if you take the citizen as the center, and there are like maybe life moments like you move to one city to another, it affects all these different areas. But from the point of view of the human, then somebody would need to take care of all these different aspects of your relocation related to education of children or schooling of children and your healthcare and so forth. So this is something that I think like it's very natural for the, maybe this is a Nordic model that we rely on. We would be happy if somebody would take care of all this automatically. But I think this kind of would be a kind of a commercially viable model as well, because then you would just put the consumer in the center.
Thank you, Petri. Megan, what do you think? Regional differences, or maybe different schools of thought, if not regional?
Yes, definitely. I think that, that this has been said several times in the EU, but not just in the EU, but also in Finland specifically, that we have a real opportunity here to kind of lead the way in these types of ethics and legislation around this. We're not necessarily going to be able to have the resources to compete with, China or the United States. But if you are able to pass things like, GDPR is something that people will be really familiar with. The US companies have to comply with this. This is not something, if they want to have the entire spending block of the EU, that's really where the key benefit is here for the type of laws that would get passed. There's a whole spending block of people. So if you want to engage with this audience in a digital format, you're going to have to comply with these types of regulations. So it's about trying to do things in a way that is not prohibiting, future and younger upstarts and actors to be able to build these kinds of tools. So for instance, if you say, that this is the way that, data has to be processed, and then all of these other bigger, larger companies already have all of these pre-trained data sets, and now suddenly new incumbents are not able to build those kind of tools on their own, then that's a problem as well. So it's about, having consorting with experts, having an understanding of trying to be one step ahead, looking at what we did, or more importantly, didn't do with the internet. So when the internet came out, we didn't have any of these regulations. We were able to predict maybe some of the problems that would come, and yet the legislation was very far behind on that. So with AI, one of the things is that we actually know a lot of the major implications now and in the future as these technologies expand. So it's about trying to be a little bit more proactive of how to protect people this way. But this is really where the EU can stand out, I think.
Thank you, Megan. And what do you think, Teemu?
Well, I think one of the words that people use a lot in the now the forthcoming EU regulation on AI and digital services in general is sustainability. And I think sustainability, I like that word because it kind of highlights the fact that that when we make services, let's say, ethically sustainable, if you will, it means that in the long run, the solution is better for everyone. Like if we would sort of short-term reap the benefits, no matter the side effects and the harms that are caused to the users and to the citizens, then I don't think that is a very sustainable and long-term good strategy. And I think what is now being sort of at least attempted by the EU and of course in the Nordics as well, is to try to make the regulation look a bit further out into the future and make it sustainable in the way that we don't have to then sort of be reactive and start correcting the harms that have been caused, but rather sort of look a bit further out and lay out even the future legislation in a predictable manner. And I think that's in the interest of the businesses as well, that they know what are the big broad brush strokes of the legislation that is coming up even in the future, up for a couple of years into the future. So keeping up to date as to what is being done in terms of on the regulatory front, I think that's really important for businesses, so that you don't have to sort of suddenly say that, oops, now my business model is no longer compatible with the regulation that is introduced last month, and then it's already too late to do anything about it. But rather sort of good to be ahead of the game. And I think that's it might sort of sometimes feel like there's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of work that you need to do, and especially SMEs are struggling, of course, to stay ahead of the game. But I suppose the Nordic flavor of arranging things is that there is a lot of sort of government support for that, and there's public institutions, public universities, and other government organizations that are offering their support to do that. And I think that's what is needed for SMEs to not be sort of at the disadvantage compared to the larger corporations that have the legal units and the sort of muscle to even affect things in terms of the regulation.
Unmute myself. I think we're about to run out of time. I have one question related to all this about Finland and the US and educating people on AI and using it in the society. It's always brought up that in Finland and in the Nordic countries in general, people have a lot of trust in government, and they have a lot of trust in one another. When you have any studies that compare how well they feel they can trust other people or the government, Nordics often come on top. And of course, AI is, as in the beginning, Teemu mentioned, there's a lot of threats and a lot of thoughts about how it can be used for evil, in a sense. Do you think this makes a difference in how the society approaches AI and how willing people are to engage with it or see it as a benefit rather than as something that you need to sort of fight against? And if you think of a society like Finland and a society like the US, what do you think is the significance of trust in our approaches to AI? And I'm going to ask you to be very quick on this big question because we're about to run out of time. But let's start with Megan this time.
Yeah, I think that it is really critical, and I'll just like to give a really brief answer on this. That was really at the heart of the kind of course concept, as Teemu mentioned, about this fear mongering that happens in the media a lot. We want people to have this fundamental understanding so that they can take these kinds of things with a grain of salt. They can have this awareness of things like algorithmic bias, but once you actually understand it, you can see that, sometimes you choose to engage with it, like, Netflix recommendations. Sometimes it's a good tool and it benefits us a lot. So it's just about getting this general awareness to get people to start to, once you understand it, you'll never stop thinking of the world in this way. And that's what we're aiming for here.
Thank you, Megan. What about Petri?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think like this comes back to the question of educating people. I mean, like Teemu was talking a lot about these myths. So we built in CERN, we built a nuclear reactor, and all over the world, people are trying to build fusion reactors. And I guess theoretically, there's a possibility that they would blow up the Earth. I mean, if you ask the experts, maybe they cannot rule out the possibility that there will be a black hole in CERN. I don't know, but maybe this is not true. But I mean, like if you start by talking about AI as a kind of Terminator point of view and talking about super intelligence and singularity, that it's possible theoretically that there will emerge an AI that will be a threat to humankind. It's in the same league. So I'm happy that I think that this discussion has been gone down somewhat, and maybe it's because of the work of Teemu and because of the work of Teemu and Megan or some other reasons. But I think like when you know more, then you trust more, and then things start to work.
And Teemu.
Yeah, I'll just finish up on a positive note, or let's say a sort of a optimistic note, in the sense that to any sort of decision makers out there, my sort of advice is to not indeed sort of get into the fear mongering and the risks based state of mind, or that, let's say, the problem oriented frame of mind, but rather the solution oriented frame of mind, and where you need to not only identify the problems. Of course, it's important to identify the problems, and that's what we also do, but it's also you shouldn't stop there. You should also look out for the existing solutions, or the partial solutions, or the attempted solutions, and then improve them. Now, this is what I've seen a lot of the time being the issue, that people sort of end up discussing and listing, endlessly more and more problems, and then sort of feeling helpless. But you should never stop there. You should start maybe by identifying the problems, and then also listing what are the solutions, how far we've already gone, and then thinking of the next steps. And I think that's what I would also like to see happening in AI and where we're in technology in general.
Thank you, Teemu. That, I think, is a perfect note. On a positive note, very unfinished of you to end this on a positive note. So thank you again so much for our speakers, Teemu Roos, Megan Scheibel, Petri Myllymäki, and thank you to everyone who attended today and for all your questions and for engaging. I can see that there were a few questions that we didn't get to, but never fear, we are very much hoping that you'll be in touch either with our speakers directly or with Alec Thornham. Alec opened the event today and works at the University of Helsinki. So if you have any questions, comments, or ideas about collaborations, please feel free to absolutely be in touch. Alec has already written his contact info in the chat, so you can find his email there. And there were, I believe, a few links to our speakers today, but of course you can find them online easily. So thank you everyone so much attending. We're going to send a link to the video of this later to everybody who's registered. So if you want to go back to this conversation or share it, please check your emails for the link at a later date. Thank you so much, everyone. We will end our event today here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.